This is going to be a tough review. Not because the HL15 from 45 Drives isn't a premium piece of hardware, it's because it is. When 45 Drives reached out to me asking if I'd like to take a look at their new system, the HL15, I initially thought they had the wrong email. I received this thing about a month ago, and while yes, it was sent over at no cost, and yes, the folks over at 45 Drives have been amazing, that will not play a factor into my review of this product. So let's get started. Just a brief background on 45 Drives, you've probably seen their Storinator system featured in some real YouTuber videos. Those have gathered responses from the home lab community like, man, I wish I could afford one of those, or why don't they make a smaller, cheaper version for us regular folks? Well, they've been listening and have now ventured into our neck of the woods with their 45 home lab division, and the HL15 is their first product to release. It's a 4U chassis made out of cold rolled steel and powder coated, so not only does it look really nice, it's also strong AF. Inside we have access to 15 3.5-inch friction mount drive bays that connect directly to their custom backplane. This makes sense since storage servers are kind of what 45 Drives does. The backplane is great since it handles all the power distribution, and the data from all 15 drives can be handled with 4 cables running back to the motherboard. There are 6 intake fans that are not PWM, so they will be running at a constant speed 100% of the time. Luckily, they aren't really loud, but I would have liked to see a PWM option. On to the living room of this case, which is pretty much as open concept as you can be. No frills in terms of layout and will support any standard ATX motherboard. Overall, it's a well-built chassis. What I have here though is the full build. This comes all pre-assembled, and the only requirement from you is to plug it in and press the power button, which is on the back by the way. We have a Supermicro X11 SPH and CTF motherboard paired with a 6-core Xeon Bronze 3204 and 32 gigabytes of RAM. To power it all, we have a 750 watt Corsair modular ATX power supply. I'm not really going to get too heavy into the motherboard and specs of this stuff because I don't think many of you are going to go with the full build anyway. Here's a link to a Serve the Home post about this exact board if you want to check it out. My quick thoughts though, it's an awesome freaking board. Dual 10 gigabit NICs, IPMI, dual mini SAS HD connectors, dual SATA SAS 8087 connectors, dual Oculink ports, and some SATA DOM connectors. You get 4 PCIe slots, but only one of them is a full 16x slot, which is kind of lame. I would have liked to see at least 2. Then you only get a single NVMe slot, but I can live with that. The best feature though is the IPMI, letting you access the machine over the network to turn it on, view the console, and even attach media. As for the processor, the included Xeon Bronze is, well, underwhelming. Now I get why this is the chip they went with. While the HL15 isn't a proprietary system, it's really designed to be a storage server, so the 6 cores here should be enough to keep up with a single storage system. And I'm sure it's also to keep costs down, which leads me to the big ass elephant in the room. This system, if you go the full built option, costs $2,000. Which I mean, if you're in the market to buy an enterprise server, then $2,000 isn't that much, but this is running some hardware that is quite a few generations old. And remember, this is for home labbers. Now you don't have to buy the full system. You can purchase just the chassis and the backplane, but that will run you $800. Okay, let's have a conversation real fast. $800 is a lot of money. I know that, you know that, 45 Drives knows that. It's not some crazy secret that you can buy a 4U chassis and an HBA card for less than half the price and effectively get the same thing. That isn't how this is marketed though. This is designed to be a premium product with exceptional build quality and high-end materials, and that it is. The big problem here is that most of the home lab community prides themselves on building out their lab on the exact opposite of that. Now, I don't mean everyone with a home lab just fills it with junk. I just mean that in general, home labbing is about using older hardware and being thrifty. 45 Drives entering the home lab market with an $800 chassis is the equivalent of standing outside a thrift store and trying to sell a Ferrari. However, there's always a market for luxury products, and if I'm being real, $800 is a lot of money, but it's nowhere near being this unobtainable realm. So maybe they're not selling a Ferrari. Maybe it's more like a maxed out Ford Raptor. So if you're in the market for a really high quality chassis with room for 15 drives and has a convenient backplane to work with, and you've got the cash, I guarantee you'll love this thing. I know. You'd love this to be cheaper, or love a model that maybe doesn't have the high-end build quality to come in at a lower cost. 45 Drives knows this. This is literally the first consumer product released from a company that specializes in high-quality enterprise storage gear. They've already teased some other concept products, including a Storinator Junior powered by a Raspberry Pi. So trust me, they know. Here's the thing too, I have no idea what their margins are and how much any of this costs them, so for all I know, they could be taking a loss on these things. Moral of the story is, yes, the HL15 is expensive compared to typical home lab offerings, but you're getting a quality product from a company that is actively listening to their audience. Okay, so enough with price. We addressed it. You're an adult. You understand. And now we're moving on. Like I mentioned, nothing about this is proprietary, so you can install essentially whatever fits and whatever software you want. 45 Drives has their own Houston UI that I'll be taking a look at in a separate video. But what I want to do here is actually give my HL15 a nice little upgrade. I went ahead and upgraded the processor to a Xeon Silver 4214, upping the core count from 6 to 12, and now we get hyper-threading, so that's even more of a bump. Then I had to add more RAM, so now we're running 128 gigabytes of DDR4 ECC. For networking, 10 gig is great, but why not 40 gig? Yep, I threw in a Mellanox Connect X3 to make sure we have as little network bottlenecking as possible. For storage, I know it would have been cool to see me load up this thing with 15, 20 terabyte drives, but I'm not that big of a YouTuber yet, so I counter that with 4 terabyte drives, then 6 of these Intel Enterprise SSDs, and 2 Samsung Pro NVMe drives. I basically wanted different tiers of storage in here to test. Whether or not they make it into the final form of this build, who knows. For my operating system of choice, I went with TrueNAS Scale, as it's pretty much the gold standard in the home lab world when it comes to data storage. And of course, the most important upgrade, RGB. Yeah, the front fangirls look so nice, we gotta let them shine. Going into TrueNAS, I set up a pool on each of my tiers: hard drives, SATA SSDs, and NVMe. I went with the stripe on the solid state drives just to see what kind of speeds we could get, and for the hard drives, I went with a more conventional RAID Z1. I put this to a real world test and did something I do all the time, and that's transfer large video files from my Windows workstation to my NAS using SMB. The hard disk array was about what you'd expect, but still very respectable at 350 megabytes per second. The SATA SSD array comes in at a much faster 1.9 gigabytes per second. That's about 15 gigabits per second, which would be more than enough to saturate one of the 10 gig ports on the motherboard. Moving on to the NVMe pool, we were seeing 2.3 gigabytes a second. Not quite the 40 gigabit speed of our Connect X3, but at 18.5 gigabits per second, I think we may be pushing the limit of standard SMB transfer. These speeds are honestly fantastic if you're looking to back up large files to the HL15. I mean, even on the hard disk array, we're pushing 2.5 gigabits per second. To test some more speeds under different scenarios, we moved to running an FIO benchmark locally on the system to remove any network or protocol variables. I started with a similar test where we write a single large file directly to each pool. The hard disk array clocked in at 492 megabytes per second, the SATA SSDs at 2.1 gigabytes per second, and the NVMe pool at 3.1 gigabytes per second. For the most part, they're fairly close to our real-world SMB test. However, I did expect to see higher numbers from the 2 striped Samsung 980 Pros. This could have something to do with the $20 card I'm using or the test itself. I'm not going to pretend to be some type of guru. I ran another test to simulate what it would look like with multiple users writing smaller, more realistic size files to each pool. And wait, all the pools are showing roughly the same speeds and IOPS. Well, that's where ZFS and its various caching mechanisms come in. For random asynchronous writes to the system, ZFS will actually cache the writes to memory, then offload them to storage. So it makes sense that when all the pools are utilizing this, we are seeing consistently high speeds and IOPS. Like 1 gigabyte per second writes from multiple small files to a hard disk array is actually nutty. Same goes for when we try to push the IOPS to the limit. roughly 400,000 IOPS across all pools.
But Brett, that's not fair. You're not showing what the drives can do. You're showing what ZFS can do.
Yeah, no shit. Isn't that the point? To show what you can expect to see when you actually use the system? This whole video is about what it's like to use this device, not the nuances and theoretical speeds of various disk types and configurations. So with all that said, this thing's pretty freaking fast, and with an average power draw of around 110 watts under standard workloads, it's not bad considering everything we have loaded up in here. Well, there you have it, the HL15 from 45 Home Lab. The Ford Raptor of the home lab world as quoted by Radal. Do I suggest everybody run out and buy this thing? No, I'm not some out-of-touch monopoly man who doesn't understand how money works. Do I suggest you buy this if you have the cash for a high-quality storage system? Absolutely. This thing is gorgeous and should honestly last longer than the rack you put it in. The 15 friction bays and backplane are just awesome quality of life features, and trust me, I know the alternative. I literally live it. I do hope to see some more products coming from the 45 Home Lab line, as I think this is a great start. If you have opinions on this, which I know you do, the best place to express them is down in the comments, and the second best place is over on the 45 Drives forum. That's all I have for you on this one. If you liked it, drop a like. If you like content like this and you want to see my thoughts on the 45 Drives Houston UI, then make sure you're subbed so you'll be notified when that video goes live. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube members and my Patreons. You guys are my 45 supporters. Maybe it's about 45 at this point. I don't know. That can fit 15 drives inside you. Yeah. You guys are the best. And if you're still watching, you're great too. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.